The following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
Well, yo-ho, hello there, Downers. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the least comfortable show on the web. You know the name. It's The System is Down. It's the best show on the interwebs. My name is Dan Smots. I am your host, and if you're new here, welcome to the show. You picked a good one to start on. This is the place where we talk about things like conspiracies, politics, religion, and everything that people don't like to talk about. And today's question of the day is abortion? Yes, abortion, question mark. Where do you stand on it? Do you have a stance on it? If you don't, you really probably should. I know there's a lot of people that just like to ignore it and pretend like it's not there. But I think it's really important that people at least know why they think what they think, and or at the very least know what they think. So I would advise you, before we get into this conversation, maybe even just pause and think about that. Think about your actual stance and see if it changes. See if it changes throughout this conversation with Abby Johnson. For me personally, I've gone back and forth on the issue a bit. I was raised very conservative Christian and believed hardcore, no abortion, no circumstances, no matter what. And I've had my bouts of times where I thought maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a time before there's a life in this quote unquote clump of cells, and that would be okay, right? But the problem with that, obviously, is you have to figure out where that line is. I don't want to get off on a diatribe because we're going to talk about all this stuff in the episode, and Abby says all this stuff way better than I do, but I say that to say I've gone back and forth on the issue, and I'm genuinely curious to hear if if this episode sways your opinion at all, or strengthens your opinion, or anything. It's a topic that's been very politicized and made into this divisive thing, rather than, focusing on the reality of what it is happening in an abortion. There's one side of this debate that thinks the other side is trying to take away women's rights. And then there's the other side that thinks the first side is murdering children. So, you can see how it's a bit of a sticky subject. And Abby Johnson was super gracious to give me a whole bunch of time, way more than we actually planned on, because the conversation went so well. And we're going to jump into it here in about 35 to 60 seconds. But in case you haven't been listening to the show, I want to let you know that the Downers Club is now on Patreon at patreon.com/The System is Down. You can sign up for as little as $5 a month and get several bonus episodes of this show every single week, plus video episodes and bonus video content, all sorts of fun stuff. At certain levels, I send you merch and DVDs and all sorts of strange things. So get over there, get in here, get into the Downers Club, help support the show. Patreon.com/The System is Down. All right, guys, let's jump into this. Here's my conversation with the wonderful and brave Abby Johnson. Let's get weird. I guess today is educator, author, and former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson. Abby, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I heard your story on Steven Crowder's show, actually, and found it fascinating, some of the stuff that you're talking about that you've been through, and I had to pick up a copy of your book, and it's pretty rare for me to finish any book, whether it's reading or audio, which I listen to it, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
So thanks for putting that on Audible. I appreciate it. But it's pretty rare for it's pretty rare for me to even finish an audio book, but I found it to be not just a informative read, but I found it really well written, and it kept my attention. So
thank you. Well, yeah, people have said, oh, I read it in like a day, and I'm like, I don't know if that means it's a good read or if I write like a kindergartner. So I don't. But either way, it keeps their attention. So
absolutely, yeah, I thought it was great. So give a little bit of background on you before we get into the Planned Parenthood stuff, like your upbringing, and especially like with your faith in your upbringing, and your thoughts on abortion before you got into this.
Sure, yeah. I was raised in a Christian home. amazing parents, and, going to church, doing the whole youth group thing, all that.
Right.
And then I was baptized when I was 8. So, I grew up knowing the Lord, loving him, serving him. And then I went to college, and I went to Texas A&M. And like a lot of college kids do, I found partying far more interesting than class,
Right.
and certainly more interesting than church. So I sort of fell away from my faith during that time. Was never like an atheist or anything like that. I was still a Christian, but just was not really plugged in. And then I met a woman with Planned Parenthood, and she was just, giving me all the talking points of Planned Parenthood and how great they are and all these women that they serve. And, I just thought, wow, that sounds great. I
Right.
mean, it sounded good to me. I remember in high school saying that I was pro-life, but if you would have, put me in a debate against someone who was pro-choice, I would have lost, because abortion wasn't something that we talked about in my home. It wasn't something we talked about, as we sat around the dinner table or anything. Being pro-life was something that we said, but it really wasn't how we lived.
Sure.
And so, when I met this woman from Planned Parenthood, I was basically like, just a blank slate for her to start writing all of her talking points on.
Right. So, so you say that your parents weren't, they weren't like explicitly anti-abortion. Did they just not take a stance on it, or like?
No, they were pro-life. Like, they were against abortion, but we didn't talk about it. And
Sure.
I grew up in South Louisiana, and there were no abortion clinics around where we lived. I think the closest abortion clinic would have probably been like 2 hours away. I'd never heard of a pregnancy center my entire life. I don't even know if there were pregnancy centers around where we lived. So it just, I don't know. They weren't activists in any way, shape, or form. They were definitely against abortion, but it just wasn't something that we did anything with,
Right. Gotcha. Now, after you were recruited was it recruiting to just like volunteer to help out, or what was the situation there?
Yeah, they were trying. It was at a volunteer fair, so they were trying. It was a bunch of nonprofits from the area, and they were trying to recruit volunteers and probably patients too, and maybe potentially staff. And so, yeah, I got involved. I was just super naive. I didn't know anything about them, and so I got involved, and I started volunteering actually as a client escort. So, like not the porn kind, but
Sure.
the like walking women to and from their car when they had an appointment for an abortion. And I just thought these women deserve to, go to a clinic without being harassed, which is, of course, that was what they had told me, that these people were out there were doing, and just trying to take away women's rights and all of this. And so, yeah, I mean, I got involved as a volunteer. And then shortly after that, I graduated from college. And even before I graduated, I was offered a position with them and took it immediately, because I really believe that, we were helping women,
Right.
and that I was there to help women, and felt like this is what I should be doing.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people who speak out against abortion, abortion clinics and things like that. They'll dehumanize the caregivers there. The thing that I liked about hearing your story is you get to see it is very humanizing, and you had kind of an internal conflict with how you were raised, and this thing that you didn't just think it's okay and legal. You thought that it was doing a moral good. You were convinced of that, right?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, hopefully that's sort of what my story does for people in on both sides of the aisle is, I think that the pro-choice movement has really done a pretty good job to dehumanize those that are against abortion and those who go and stand in front of abortion clinics. And then the pro-life movement has done a pretty good job at dehumanizing not only the women that go in, but also the clinic workers, people that
Right.
work there, because that's natural. I mean, anytime you have a huge, human tragedy, a large human tragedy, people look for someone to blame.
Right.
And so, naturally in this situation, they're going to want to blame the people who are participating, who are, performing the abortions.
Hmm.
And so it's, natural that they would blame the clinic workers. We're really trying to shift blame away from people to sort of this systemic injustice
Sure.
that is cultural, that's in our society. And I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that. But I think when I left the clinic, there were certainly people, I don't know, they looked at me and they were like, oh, like she's normal. Like she doesn't have like horns and a
Right.
pitchfork and a tail. Like she's totally normal. I had a kid at that time when I left. I was married. I had totally normal parents, like a normal upbringing. And that was surprising, I think, to people in the pro-life movement, because they really wanted to make it like, oh, we had these crazy lives and and that wasn't the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how long did you work for them before you got promoted to the position of director?
So I was there for 6 years. I was a director for 2 years. I had different jobs there. So um, my first promotion really came as uh, I was the community services director, fundraising director. I worked in public policy for Planned Parenthood. So I did, the political part, legislative part. I did all the fundraising. And so that was my first promotion that I got, that I got about 4 years after I had started working there. And then I had been doing that for a while and it was okay, but I really missed doing the clinical part of it.
Hmm.
And so um, the position came up to run the clinic and I thought, no, this is actually where I want to be. Like, I'm tired of like schmoozing for money. Like I want to be with the patients. I want to work with the patients. And so, um, I ended up applying for that job and getting it. And then I was the director for a little over 2 years before I left.
Now, during this 8-year span, how did your friends and family, the people that were close to you that knew you as this, little Christian girl in the past, how did they react and respond to, the career choice that you chose?
Yeah, they definitely didn't like it. I mean, I actually didn't tell my parents for a year and a half
Hmm.
that I was working at Planned Parenthood. I had actually I start out, I think the third chapter of my book saying, never trust a decision you wouldn't tell your mom about.
Right.
And so that was definitely the case for me. I knew that my parents were against abortion. I knew that they would not agree with my decision to work for Planned Parenthood.
Hmm.
And so I didn't tell them. So I thought, well, I'll get like enough really good stories together and then I'll tell them, but I'll say, oh, but look at all the good we're doing. Right.
Right.
So when I did tell them, they weren't happy. They weren't happy that I had lied about it for so long and that I was working there.
Yeah.
My husband actually was always pro-life. So he was always against abortion. So that made,
Were
dinner
you married before
conversation tense
you started
sometimes.
there?
Yeah. Yeah, I started working there in 2001 and Doug and I got married in 2005.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I think, people have asked him, what in the world? Like, why,
Right.
if you were against this, why would you marry someone? But I mean, that's just, I don't know. I think he has said, I just always believed in the back of my mind that eventually she would see that in order to care for women, you can't separate them from their children. And that eventually she would come around to that way of thinking. But I mean, really, it's just the easier explanation. It's just that, when you fall in love, you're not like,
I liked her.
oh,
Shut up.
well, okay, well, I'm not going to love you anymore if you
Right.
still work for Planned Parenthood. I mean, it's just not the way it works. So we were in a situation where we were on very different sides of this issue, but, it still worked out. So
yeah, sure. Now, let's talk about this leaving the company. What led up to your departure, and how'd that go for you?
Yeah, so a few things. So 2009 had been sort of an interesting year for the clinic. So in January of that year, they had announced that we were going to be building the affiliate I worked for out of Houston. We were going to be building this huge facility, and it was going to be the largest abortion facility in the Western Hemisphere, and they were really proud of it. And it's currently operational. 78,000 square feet, 7 stories tall.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to be aborting babies through the 6th month of pregnancy.
Wow.
And for elective abortions for any reason. And at that time, I thought, okay, abortion's fine until the point of viability. That was really that was where my head was. That
right.
was where my moral
the
cutoff
point that's
was,
driven
right?
home, the justification.
Point of viability, when that baby can survive on its own, you should not kill it. Well,
sure.
I had always believed that point of viability was 24, 26 weeks. Well, then one day I was reading a super scientific article in People magazine and it said that it was telling a story of this baby. I think her name was Lily, and it was in the UK, and she was born at 21.5 or something, 21 weeks, 5 days. And she survived, and she's fine. She's healthy, happy little girl. She's probably a teenager now. And so I read that and I was like, oh, dang, now I've got to move my point of viability back, right? Because
right.
this girl was 21 weeks. So now I've got to believe that any abortion after 21 weeks is wrong, since that's now the point of viability.
Right.
And so here we are in this meeting, and they're bragging about doing abortions through 24 weeks. And I was like, ugh, that. And I had told people oh, I would never work for a clinic that did abortions past viability. But here we were. So that was probably the first time I came home and said, I don't know that this is going to be where I work for the rest of my life. That was sort of the first crack. But then in April of that year, I was awarded their Employee of the Year award. So that sort of got me back on track, and I was liking what I was doing. And then that summer, we had run out of Title 20 funding, which is a cash grant funding. We always ran out in April or May. And so we had run out, and the primary people that we saw in the Title 20 funding program were undocumented immigrants and minors. And so most of these women were coming in on Title 20 funds to get birth control or annual exams or STD testing or whatever. And so we had to, the corporate had made a decision well, what are we going to do? Are we going to, continue to see these women? Are we going to see them for free because they hadn't been paying anything if they were on the 20 program? Or do we charge them, a reduced fee, or do we just charge them at regular price? And so they had decided, our management team had decided that they were just going to continue seeing them, but they were going to have to pay self-pay, full pay prices. And I just thought that was ridiculous. I was like, this is crap, because so for instance, a woman, if she came in for a Depo-Provera birth control injection, we were going to charge her $150 for the injection plus a $30 injection fee. Okay. She's going to have to pay $180 every 3 months. For the little vial of Depo-Provera, we paid $8. But we were charging $150, and the injection fee was stupid. It didn't even require a nurse. Anybody could give the injection. So I was like, why are we charging $30? Not even you don't have to be a nurse or medical staff to do it.
They're providing these cheap contraceptives that people can't get anywhere else, right?
Yeah, that's right. Right. And so I was like, I'm sorry, but this is BS. Like, we should not be. And so I spoke up and I was like, this is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we should be, so what? We charge them $20, right? For the depot. We're still making a $12 profit.
Right.
And we're a nonprofit, right? So who cares about making money? Like, and that was when my boss, she looked at me and she said, Abby, she said, nonprofit is a tax status, not a business status.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And so I continued to see these patients. Like, we either just wrote it off or we charged them whatever they had. Like, and so I had sort of gotten reprimanded for that because I wasn't following their money-making directive.
Mm-hmm.
And, but then so things were like starting to sort of like spiral down for me,
right.
you know? And so then in August of that year, I had a budget meeting with my same supervisor, and the budgets all came from the affiliate. So we didn't create our budget. They were just given to us. And so I was looking at the budget and I noticed that they wanted us to double our abortion quota, the certain number of abortions that we had to sell to patients.
Mm.
And I was like, wait a minute. Like, I thought that our goal here at Planned Parenthood was to reduce the number of abortions. I mean, that's what
they say.
That's what we told everybody. That's
mm-hmm.
what we told the media, you know? And, but here it was, like, we were doubling our quota. And so I said something to my boss about it, and she started laughing at me, and she said, why would we want to reduce the abortion numbers? That's how we make our money.
Wow.
And so things were just sort of like stacking up, and I was, you know, trying to decide, like, what am I going to do here? And then, about a month later, we had a visiting physician come in from out of town, and he was going to do ultrasound guided abortions, which was not, that was not the way that Planned Parenthood, that was not our protocol. Our
Sure.
protocol was to perform the abortion in a blind manner. So the doctor has a suction tube, he puts it into the uterus, he blindly pokes around in the woman's uterus until he thinks he has enough of everything in the glass jar.
Wow.
And so this doctor, though, was telling me, I mean, I don't think this is going to be shocking for anybody, but that it's safer for women if the doctor can see what they're doing while they're performing the abortion, while they're performing surgery, right? And I was like,
most practices are safer if you are able to see what you're doing, but
right. You know. So I was like, yeah, and that made sense because I couldn't think of any other surgical procedure that was performed blindly. Like,
right.
I couldn't think of anything else where the doctor literally could not see what he's doing while he's performing surgery. Yet abortion is the most common surgical procedure in the United States.
Well, for even procedures like, I don't know, colonoscopies and stuff, they send a camera in first.
That's right. Yeah. Like, I mean, appendectomies, root canals. I mean, any wisdom teeth. Like, you don't just randomly grab a tooth and pull it, right? Like, you want to see what you're doing. And so it was strange. And so but this doctor, you know, I went and asked my boss, like, if this is safer for women, why aren't we doing it? And she told me that it is safer, but that using an ultrasound during the abortion procedure would take up about an extra 3 minutes of time. And our goal at Planned Parenthood was to have a woman on the table, off the table, abortion complete in 5 minutes.
Good Lord.
And so adding an additional 3 minutes of time was just not something we could do. I mean, we would do, I don't know, 40 to 60 abortions a day. So you just don't have that sort of time. And so I accepted that, but the doctor told me that he would show me what this type of abortion procedure looked like when he came next. And so that was when I got to see what was really happening to this fetus in the womb. And the woman was 13 weeks pregnant, and I saw this 13-week-old baby like fighting and struggling for his life against the abortion instruments. And I knew then that I'd been lied to by Planned Parenthood, and I wasn't a victim. Like, I eagerly believed the lies. But that in turn, I had lied to just thousands of women who had come into my door, and I knew that I had to get out. Like, I knew that I couldn't stay there anymore. And so I decided to leave. And when I left, I reached out to a pro-life group because I knew I was going to need help finding a job.
Mm-hmm.
And because I lived in a super conservative area, and I joke, I mean, I was definitely the most hated local celebrity in town. Like, everybody hated my guts. I worked in an abortion clinic. And so I knew I was going to need their help. And so I reached out to them. And when Planned Parenthood found out that I had reached out to the pro-life group, they actually sued me.
Really?
And tried to get a permanent gag order against me, so I wouldn't be able to talk about what I had seen inside the abortion industry.
By what do you mean by what you had seen? Is there stuff that they're not typically super happy to share with the public?
Yeah, I mean, they did, you know, I mean, being the director and being pretty high up in management by the time I left, you know, I think their main concern, so they've got this big donor that gives about $23 million a year through a fund called the Justice Fund. And this guy gives $23 million so that low-income women can have access to abortion. And it's super, I mean, it comes across, like, if you look at the actual numbers, like, it comes across as like super targeted to minorities, which makes sense because this dude is really, he's an overpopulation person and all this. And so anyway, he was giving this anonymously, and I knew who it was. So I think they were really concerned that I was going to tell people who it was, which I have. I mean, it's Warren Buffett, which is, you know, not a huge surprise to people that know who he is and what he does. But
Sure.
So I think they didn't want that getting out. And then also just all the settlements and stuff, like the things that we had settled outside of court, you know, perforating a woman's uterus, which, you know, then sent her to the hospital, and we would pay her off. Like, literally, we'd give her like $800.
Wow.
Because, you know, these women that were coming in, they were most of them were low income.
Right.
And so you wave $800 in front of them, and that's enough to keep them quiet. When, you know, really, they could have taken us for hundreds of thousands of dollars,
right.
But they don't know any better. And then we make them sign a statement saying that, you know, they won't ever go to the media, you know, in exchange for this money, for this tiny little teeny amount of money. And so they do it. And, you know, we had situations where we had left part of the baby in the woman's uterus, and she would become septic, and she'd have to go to the emergency room, and they'd have to do another D&C. And I mean, it was just terrible. It was just really bad patient care. But I mean, like, you can't expect anything else when you're taking 5 minutes of time.
Right.
The doctor's literally with the patient for 5 minutes.
Right.
So it's, you know, there's just a lot of things that I think they didn't want getting out in the public, which, I mean, in hindsight, they probably did the right thing by suing me because they were worried that I was going to expose all this crap. And I mean, that's exactly what I've done.
Right.
But that actually wasn't when I left Planned Parenthood, I had no desire to speak out publicly. It actually wasn't until they sued me. When they sued me, they sent out a press release to the AP saying, you know, oh, we're regretfully having to sue our former employee for confidentiality issues, blah, blah, blah. That got picked up by the AP. And that was the reason that I was on like CNN and Fox. And, you know, that was the reason it got picked up because of their press release. If they would have not done that, nobody would have been interested, and I would just be a practice manager in an OBGYN office. But it was their own mistake. It was their own arrogance and foolishness that caused my story to get put into the public eye, and then caused me to, you know, start talking about what I knew because people were asking.
Sure. What did they think they had against you in this case? Because in listening to your book, it seemed like they had a very, very thin case.
They really had nothing. So what had happened was when I left Planned Parenthood, my two best friends that I worked with, I told them that I was leaving. I told them why I was leaving. And I told them that the Coalition for Life, this pro-life group, was helping me. And so they had said, well, if you're not going to be here, we don't want to be here either. So do you think they would help us get a job? And so I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they would. So they ended up sending me their resumes. I sent them on to the Coalition for Life. all this kind of stuff, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think what happened was maybe people started calling, I don't know this for sure, but my best educated guess is that other employers started calling, asking like for references or whatever, because their resume was getting circulated to different places. And then Planned Parenthood found out about it. So Planned Parenthood asked them, are you trying to leave? Because if they found out that you were leaving your job, they would just fire you
Mm-hmm.
on the spot. And so what I think happened was that they probably were like, no, we're not, and then they found out, oh, somebody called. So what happened was they actually lied and said that I had stolen their resumes from their personnel file and was distributing them without their permission.
Mm.
Well, when we got to court, I don't know, like if they just, forgot that I would have a huge email trail of them asking me to send their resume over
Right.
with their resume attached. But I mean, I had that. So my attorney basically stood up when these two women got on the stand and said, if she stole your resume, then what's all these
Right.
emails about? And then, they had to admit we were lying. We actually did ask for her help. And then that was it. I mean, the judge threw it out, but that was really the only reason I think they were able to even get a court date was because these two women had lied.
Right.
And we could have technically gone after them for perjury, but they had been my best friends, so I didn't want to be too big of a jerk. But yeah,
you don't get much to gain in that anyway.
Yeah.
So it's all just so bizarre. Why would they send out the press release and broadcast this thing to the world if they had to know that they didn't have a whole lot to bank on here?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I have no idea why they sent that press release out. I think they did it in fear. I think they were scared that I was going to go to the media, so they were trying to sort of head it off.
Get ahead, yeah.
But I was never planning on going to the media. I was never planning on telling my story. So at that time, actually, when I first left, I was like, I don't know that I consider myself pro-life, because I thought pro-lifers were nuts. And I was like, I don't want to be involved in whatever they're doing. I mean, so it's like they thought that I was going to come out and like be this like pro-life darling for them, but I wasn't even really there yet, And so, yeah, it was weird. It was a terrible error on their part, because that's truly what shoved me into this position that I'm in right now.
Right. Hey, Dan Smots here. I'm taking a second to interrupt myself talking to talk about myself because, I don't get paid a penny for the hours and hours that I put into creating this show for you guys in your greedy little ears, and I've got a family to feed. To make that happen, I run my own media business called Goulash Media. If you have a need in anything from video production to graphic design to audio production and beyond, you can get it all for a painfully fair price at Goulash Media. In video, I do weddings, music videos, commercials, pageants, plays, etc., etc., etc. For design, I do photo editing, album art, logos, branding, business cards, merchandise, you name it. For audio, I do engineering, production, editing, jingles, and, well, podcasts. So if you've got a media need of any kind, or if you'd just like to give a little something back and help keep my children fed, check out all the endless options at my website, goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where we cater to the little guy with the big vision. Okay. You talk about how they had quotas for these abortions. I find it appalling that that's a thing, like car sales. But we hear in the media all the time about the other services that they offer, like mammograms and pap tests and things like that. Like, what is the percentage of one over the other as far as what they do most?
So looking at my budget, and which I actually ended up finding like a couple years after I'd left, I found it like in an old purse. So looking at my budget and looking at the budgets of other workers who have left, it looks like the honest percentage of the abortions they're providing are around 40%. So it's about 40% abortion and about 60% other services. So But all of those other services, and this sounds totally like Alex Jones conspiracy theory, and it's totally not. Okay?
It's all right. It's all right. It's welcome here. So
okay, so the all of their services that they provide, like their primary service would be birth control, right, and STD testing. Those are the they don't do mammograms or anything like that.
Really,
their primary service that they provide to women: birth control, STD testing. Now, if you look at those two procedures, services they're providing, they're doing it for a reason. So why do they want to test for gonorrhea and chlamydia? Because they care about the gonorrhea and chlamydia rates in your community? No. They're testing for those and getting people on funding for it and doing it for free because they know that these people coming in for STD testing are probably statistically participating in high risk behavior, right? Like riskier sexual behavior. And statistically, we also know that people that participate in high risk sexual behavior are also more likely to have an unplanned pregnancy.
Right.
And so Planned Parenthood wants to be that primary source of contact for them so that when they do have that unplanned pregnancy, they go back to the same place that they've already been before. And then Planned Parenthood can talk them into having an abortion, can sell them an abortion, because that's really how they make their money.
Right.
Okay. It's the same thing with contraception. They don't care about contracepting the masses. They're not interested in reducing the abortion rate. If they were, Clearly. They wouldn't have abortion quotas, right? The reason that they're providing contraception to your 11, 12, 13-year-old kids is because they know, according to their own numbers, that 54% of women who have abortions were using contraception at the time that they got pregnant. So they know that more than likely at some point in time, this girl's contraception is going to fail, particularly if you put her on like a pill. I mean, I'm almost 38 years old and I can't remember to take a pill every day at the same time within a 2-hour window. Okay. Right. So ask a 13, 14-year-old to do it. No way. Okay. So they know that the risk of human failure rate is very high in that population of people. And so let's get them on contraception. Let's get them on a method that has a high human error rate so that they will experience an unplanned pregnancy. And because they came to us for contraception, because they trust us with their sexual health, they will eventually come back to us when they do have that unplanned pregnancy. And it's just another opportunity for us to sell them an abortion. It's the same reason that Planned Parenthood is trying so desperately to get into the public school systems. It's not because they have this great curriculum they want to teach your kids. It's because they want to be your friend's, your child's friend.
The go-to name.
They want to be the go-to name. In fact, when we did it, I used to do education for Planned Parenthood. When we went out to do education in schools, we would tell kids, your parents are not a safe place for you to go. Your parents do not understand what you're feeling right now. Wow. They don't understand. They're old school. They're not going to want you to be on birth control. They're not going to want you to protect themselves. They just want you to not have sex. And we know that that's not going to happen. Right. So, just come to me. I'm your trusted friend. I'm your trusted advisor. I mean, the whole point of their education program is to break the bond between parent and child.
That's horrifying.
I mean, that's it. That's what they're trying to do. And that's what they do during abortion, right? They're going to come in, you're going to come in, they're going to tell you in their counseling session that, it's not a child, it's not a baby, it's nothing. And they're doing the exact same thing. They're trying to break that maternal bond between mother and child. That's what they do. They're really good at it in many different types of services they provide. And that's why they're so successful.
Good Lord. I wasn't even aware that they were doing presentations in schools at all.
Oh yeah. And they get paid big money for it. Like here in Austin, I live in Austin, Texas, super, Planned Parenthood crazy around here. Everybody loves it.
Sure.
But, here, Austin ISD paid Planned Parenthood like $500,000 to come in and do the sex ed presentation for all of the Austin area ISD schools. And that is, their program starts in kindergarten.
Good Lord.
So
why? What does a kindergartner need to know about Planned Parenthood?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what they did. So, in a few schools, they actually took stuffed animals to these elementary classrooms, and they were showing them different sexual positions with the stuffed animals. And I mean, some of these were in like kindergarten and first grade.
Mm-hmm.
And they were showing them these different sexual positions with stuffed animals. And then, and so then like the parents found out about it and they were all like mad, whatever.
Yep.
And Planned Parenthood totally defended it. They were like, oh no, this is good. Like your kindergartners need to know about different sexual positions.
Totally normal for strangers to be showing your 5-year-old sex positions.
Yeah. It's just, they're totally perverted. Like they are, they want to teach our kids all kinds of sexual deviancy at a very, very young age.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Wow.
And they want to break down like a kid's natural modesty.
Right.
You know, they want to make
innocence.
it like, yeah, like they want to make it like, oh no, it's like, you know, it's cool to explore your body with your friends when you're in first grade. Like it's cool to take your pants off in front of each other and look at each other's private parts. Like it's just breaking down that natural modesty that children are born with. It's innate to them. They want to start doing that at a very young age.
Mm. Wow. Now, I've heard you talk, I think it was on Tucker Carlson's show. You talked about the selling of the baby parts after the abortions. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's only about 5 affiliates, 5 Planned Parenthood affiliates in the country that actually participate in this baby body part selling thing. But they're the large affiliates. So, you know, it's like Planned Parenthood Marmonte, Planned Parenthood Rocky Mountains, Planned Parenthood Houston. It's like they're big affiliates. So, because they want to have high volume. You know, you want to have a lot of babies to sell.
Right.
So, our affiliate was one that participated in this. So we basically got $200 per baby that we sent to this research company. And I'm not really sure. It was a research company called Amphioxus Cell Technologies. I'm not really sure what they were doing. Like they're closed now, but I remember one time looking it up and they were doing something with like liver experimentation or I don't know. So we never knew like what exactly they were doing with the babies. We just knew that we were supposed to package them into a styrofoam box, and like every other day somebody with Amphioxus would come to our facility, pick up the box, and we'd get a check. So even, okay, if I'm being like super conservative on the numbers, so that Houston clinic has the capability, they have the capacity to perform 75 abortions a day. Okay, so let's just say half of those patients actually end up consenting, which they all do, by the way, because you sell it to them and say, you know, oh, by the way, this is really, this is a really good program because you're going to help cure Alzheimer's and you're going to help cure Parkinson's. And so it comes across as this like really altruistic thing to do. And so the women they all consent, but let's just say that only half of them consent. Okay. So that is, and let's say that if I do the numbers and I say, okay, let's say that half of 75 come in every day, 6 days a week. And then only half of those actually end up consenting to the procedure, to the research. Our affiliate still is looking at making over $2 million a year just on that program alone. And we literally had to do nothing for the money, because either way, at the end of an abortion procedure, you're still piecing the body parts together. Right. So it's not like we're having to do any extra work. You're still having to do the same work. It's just, does it go in this styrofoam box for the research company, or does it go into this red biohazard bag for Stericycle? Right. I mean, that was literally the only difference. So it was just an easy $2 million a year plus.
Now, is it legal for them to sell parts? Or?
Yeah. So technically, yes. As long as it's not any sort of like NIH, like federal government sort of research program, then yes, you can make money. The term of art in the law says valuable consideration. Okay. So as long as you're not making, let's say, $5,000 per baby, as long as you can account for the money, the amount of money that you're getting from the technology company. So for instance, we're getting $200. Okay. So they line item that out. So they say, okay, $100 of that goes for processing, even though we're doing it anyway. Okay. We're going to line item that out and say $100 of that goes for processing.
Right.
We're going to say $50 goes for storage, keeping it in our freezer, which we'd have to keep it in the freezer anyway. Okay. And then $50 goes for shipping and handling, even though it's actually the cell tech company that's coming to pick up the box. So we're not out any shipping. Okay. As long as they can line item it out and make sense of the numbers, then it's technically legal. So what has happened now is that, and this has been going on forever, the first law on the books about fetal tissue research and handling was actually put on the books in 1974.
Really?
So this isn't something new. This is something that's been going on for many, many years. As long as Roe v. Wade has been around, they've been doing this.
Right.
So, then it sort of, the encouragement to the states was, you've got to ban all money, like any money traded has to be illegal for fetal tissue research. So if they want to do it, then they can't get any money for it. There cannot be any financial exchange between the two entities. And so many states ended up passing that. Some states, like Texas, where I live, it's just illegal, period, to perform any research on babies that are aborted. Now, if you have a miscarriage or a stillbirth and you want, to find out some answers, and so they do some research on your baby that was miscarried or stillborn, then the parent can consent to that. But if it was through an abortion, that's illegal in the state of Texas and many other states. So, but, it's not anything that Planned Parenthood has ever tried to hide. Sure. I mean, I remember when I worked there, one of the affiliates that did it, I don't know if it was like Philadelphia or somewhere up there, New Jersey, they had a page on their website that talked about their altruistic fetal tissue donation program.
Right.
So it's nothing they've ever tried to hide. I mean, they're pretty proud of it. And even when all that came out, I mean, Cecile Richards was like, yeah, isn't this great what we're doing? We're helping to cure all these diseases. And
And you got to love the spin of terminology, fetal tissue rather than baby parts,
Right. Yeah. And in reality, when you look at what's actually been done with embryonic and fetal stem cells, like, it's been nothing. There has been no cure that has come about for any disease with embryonic or fetal stem cells. The technology that's actually coming out now that is helping people with joints or, whatever it is, the different stem cell research that's come out, it's all been through either umbilical cord stem cells or it's been through adult stem cells. So we actually have nothing to show for all the collection.
A lot of money.
Babies.
A lot of money.
Yeah. But we have nothing to show medically for any of this that's been done.
Right. Wow. It's fascinating. This is horribly depressing. Let's talk about where you are now in life. I know that you gotta, I don't want to keep you here all day. I know you gotta go soon. So, tell everybody, you got out of this and you started working with Coalition for Life. Is that still going on, or where you at now?
No, my clinic actually closed. And so we've had a ton of clinics close in Texas because of different legislative efforts. So my clinic closed. The Coalition for Life then sort of went away. So I started my own organization called And Then There Were None. And we get abortion clinic workers out of the abortion industry and into different lines of employment. We have licensed therapists on staff so we can help them through whatever triggers or trauma or whatever's going on in their life. Because as you can imagine, like, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, like, you can imagine that the things that they've seen in there have been, a lot of them been pretty traumatic. So we try to help them work through that. We have a healing retreat program that they can go on. We help them with financial assistance, because somebody decides, I don't want to work in the abortion industry anymore, we don't want to be like, but I've got to stay until I find another job.
Right.
I mean, once you've decided I don't want to handle baby parts anymore, like we basically want you to get the heck out of there. Right. So we provide financial transitional support for them when they leave and until they get another job. So we have a team of over 3,000 attorneys that support them if there's any legal issues going on that they need protection from with the clinic. We have attorneys that represent them pro bono. So we have a pretty comprehensive program for them. And when we first got it started, like people in the pro-life movement, they were like, oh, it's never going to work. Nobody's ever going to leave,
Right.
And sort of like they're too far gone. Like they would never come into the pro-life movement. They'd never reach out to a pro-lifer, but joke's on them because we've actually helped over 450 workers in the past few years leave the abortion industry. And we've actually helped 7 full-time abortion doctors leave their practice in the abortion industry. So, so it's been pretty awesome to see what's happening. And then in turn, these clinic workers a lot of times will then shut down. They'll go back because of the information that they know. They go back and help shut down their former clinics. So it's pretty cool.
It's very cool. Very cool. That's amazing. Now, with your friends that were involved in the court case and your friends from the clinic, have they been in contact with you since then, or are they still no show?
No, when we still lived in College Station, well, they both got fired right after the court case because, Planned Parenthood found out they'd been lying to them and they made them look like fools. So they fired them immediately. And one of them actually moved back to Florida, and then that's where she was from. And then the other one still lived in the same town as all our family lived there. And so my husband, we'd actually taken our daughter to our pediatrician's office, and she was working at the front desk of this pediatrician's office. And my husband saw her, and she tried to like scamper away and act like she didn't see him. And he just looked at her and he was like, hey, listen, nobody's mad at you. Like Abby's not mad at you. She understands, the pressure you must have been under, and she would love to connect with you again. Right. And she just sort of put her head down and walked off. So I've never had any conversation with either one of them since then. I mean, I hope that one day they'll reach out, but the girl that worked at the pediatrician's office, like her aunt is still very involved with Planned Parenthood. So it's sort of like in the family. So the chances of her reaching out are pretty slim.
Yeah. Now, what is your opinion on, do you think that abortion should go back to being outlawed? As somebody who's been on both sides of the fence, literally, do you think that it should be outlawed, or do you think that would be detrimental to women's health like Planned Parenthood thinks?
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's ever a reason that a woman needs to have an abortion. And, I think the decision has to be made before you decide if you want to participate in something that could potentially get you pregnant. A little personal responsibility goes a long way. So, but right now what I think should happen is I think that Roe v. Wade obviously needs to be overturned. I mean, that whole judgment needs to be recalled.
Sure.
And that won't make abortion illegal. That will just hand the responsibility back over to the states, which is where I think it belongs anyway. And so then states will decide whether or not they want abortion to be legal, and it will be most likely just a vote by the people. And many states, I don't know how many, but I would say at least half or more, have laws on the books that would make abortion illegal immediately. So if Roe v. Wade were overturned, they have like these trigger laws on the books that would make abortion illegal in their state, and that would be it. So any state that has what we call a prenatal protection act. So like if a woman is killed, she's pregnant and she's killed in a drunk driving accident, then the drunk driver, and she and her baby are killed, then the drunk driver will be charged for 2 murders, or homicides. Okay, so any state that has that on the books, which is the majority of states in the U.S., those states, it would automatically be illegal.
Hmm.
And so, ultimately my goal is, we don't want abortions anywhere, but I think that has to sort of come, even more than legislative change, I think that has to sort of come from a cultural
Sure.
shift. So for me, it's not just about making abortions illegal. It's more about making them unthinkable. Just like, we look at slavery, we look at the Jewish Holocaust, we look at sex trafficking, and we go, oh my gosh, like,
Right.
how did that happen? How did we ever allow that to happen? Like, I do believe that one day we will get there, in our society, hopefully, where people will look at this the same way that they look at the Holocaust, the same way that they look at slavery, and they'll say, what in the world? Because it is the same principle.
Right.
It is the same principle that you are dehumanizing an entire group of humans, in order to carry out your desire.
Right.
So that's exactly what slavery was. I mean, it's looking at people as property, not as people. And so it's taking away their personhood. And that's what we've done with abortion. And so if we could do it with slavery, I think we can do it with abortion, but slavery wasn't ended overnight. I mean, it did take time for the culture to eventually accept that this was wrong. And I think we're dealing with the same thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I even have basically everything you just said down in my notes, so I'd say that's probably a good place to end it. I think that we're gonna look back on this and as a species and think, what the hell were we thinking? What were we doing here? But it's just it's so convenient, and it's so easy to 5 minutes and a couple $100, or I guess I don't know the numbers, but get it taken care of, and you're 18 years scot-free of responsibility. I don't know. It drives me crazy, and I'm a libertarian, and our party seems to go back and forth on this issue quite a bit. Is it the woman's liberty to her own body, or is it the liberty of the body inside her? And I've gone back and forth on it myself, but hearing your story has solidified my stance at the moment, and I find it appalling and horrifying to even think about doing it, but not to demonize people or anything.
Libertarian too.
What's that?
I lean more libertarian too, so I get what you're saying, and there's definitely libertarians on both sides that are like, well, it's pro-choice, pro-life,
Right.
whatever. But for me, our right as an individual, that right stops when my right begins to infringe on the right of another human being.
Right.
And that's what abortion is doing. And so we can talk about bodily autonomy, we can talk about all that kind of stuff, but in the end, I'm not telling a woman what to do with her body. I'm telling her what should be done with the individual human being, that body that's living inside of her.
Right.
And so it's just, for me, I mean, I think that we are at a place it's really shameful, but I think that we have to be at a similar place as, where the abolitionists were, the slavery abolitionists. Like, there had to be times where they looked at people and went, why don't you get this? Like, right. You freaking idiots. Like, what, and that's sort of where we are too. I think, like, with those of us that oppose abortion, like, I look at these women and I'm like, what logic is escaping you? Like, what science is escaping you? This is not making any sense,
Right.
And that becomes very frustrating. But
in our society, it's not even just accepted; it's promoted so positively. Like Lena, or whatever her name is, Lena Dunham, and the feminists and people saying, "I wish I would have had an abortion so that I could relate to my mother and these other people." Whatever. It's like,
I know.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, it really is sort of a sickness, and super narcissistic too. Like, to believe that our rights should have the ability to take away the rights and life of another person. Like, that's really, really narcissistic. But that's just sort of, I mean, I feel like we are living in a society full of narcissism. Everybody thinks they know better than everybody else.
Right.
You know, I mean, look at social media, like so much keyboard courage on social media, and it's just all narcissism, and that's really where we are. And it's really the antithesis of what women are created to do and what we're meant to do. And we're so focused on feminism, we have forgotten about femininity,
Right.
which
It's a bad word now.
yeah, that's who women were created to be, right? Like we were created to be feminine, we were created to be mothers, you know, and we're created to be nurturers, and we've gotten so far away from that. And for what? I'm not sure. Like to attain this brass ring that doesn't actually exist. So I mean, it is super, super frustrating, but we are seeing a change. I mean, there's, even when you go on college campuses and like I'll do events at college campuses and I'll talk to people, and there's more and more people that are like, yeah, like a lot of people don't like Planned Parenthood anymore. A lot of these college age kids, you know, they're turning away from that. They're like, look, I don't really care about abortion, but Planned Parenthood has become really too political, and they're so far left on everything and anything. And so they're, you know, I think kids are starting to sort of get it. And when you look around, like even at like the March for Life, and I mean, 75% of the people there are under the age of 25. So I think we are making a lot of ground, but it is going to take a while, and things that take a long time create frustration.
Yeah.
So, but we just do have to be patient and worry about getting our own house in order and getting our own community, you know, talking to our own communities, even our own families, talking to them about why this is important, why this is an issue that affects every single human being on this planet. And even for people who are sort of like economically inclined, you know, we look at what's happening in our country with Social Security and these other programs. We don't have enough money there. Well, yeah, like no kidding, right? Because we've aborted 60 million taxpayers over the past 40 years. So abortion has affected us in ways that we haven't even seen yet.
Sure.
In ways that we don't understand yet. But I think it will eventually come out, and we will start seeing all the negative effects and the negative consequences that killing off 60 million people has done to us.
Absolutely. Now, I'll let you go here in a second, I promise, but I want to make sure you get all your plugs in there. You have another book out, right?
Yeah, I got two books. So I have one called Unplanned, and then one called The Walls Are Talking. The cheapest place to get them is on Amazon. You can get them in Barnes and Noble and stuff, but it's super expensive. So
The Walls Are Talking, I haven't had the pleasure of reading yet. Can you give the brief on what that is and entails?
Yeah, so it's a compilation of stories from people who worked in the abortion industry, sort of all the things that people thought may be happening in the abortion clinic. This is sort of the real stories of what is happening. So it's definitely a tough read. You know, it's not something that you just breeze through and like, I feel so great after reading that. I mean, it's definitely a tough read, but I feel like it's something that we can't just put our heads in the sand and go, oh, we know abortion's bad, I don't want to hear about it.
Right.
I mean, if we are going to say that abortion is wrong, if we're going to say that abortion shouldn't be happening, then, or even if you think abortion should be happening, like you need to know what you're supporting.
Right.
And so, you know, don't be scared to take a look at the reality of what's happening to these women and what's happening inside of clinics.
Absolutely. Well, Abby, it's been a pleasure. Tell everybody again where they can find your books and more information on And Then There Were None and anything else that you've got going on.
So my website is Abby Johnson, abbyjohnson.org. You can get a lot of information there about books and things like that. My blog is there, and which I rarely update anymore because I have 7 kids, so I have no time. And
7 kids, you're very pro-life now, I see, huh?
It's super pro-life. Well, yeah, like crazy pro-life. So, yeah. So, and then our website for our ministry is abortionworker.com. We've got videos on there from former workers. You can hear their stories and, you know, hear what's going on with our ministry. And so, yeah. And then I'm on Facebook. We're both, And Then There Were None, and me, Abby Johnson. We're on Facebook, which is where we do the majority of our posting, and on Twitter.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I definitely encourage everybody to check it out. Like I said, I've read Unplanned, and I think it's a fascinating read. And I would encourage everybody to go pick up a copy of it. And the other one, names. I'm bad with names. The walls are talking. Thank you. But yeah, Abby, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if you feel like coming on again for anything to promote or talk about, you're more than welcome here.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Did your opinion change at all? Has it been swayed at all? Has it been nudged in a different direction? I mean, if you went into this completely disagreeing with Abby's points, I mean, she makes some good points. You gotta hand it to her. She's seen this stuff happen. None of the rest of us have. Well, maybe not none of us, but the vast majority of the rest of the humans have not seen what actually takes place in an abortion, inside the uterus, inside the womb. It's horrifying. But let me know. Do you disagree? Fine. Let's talk about it. Let's have a civil, uncomfortable conversation. That's what we're here to do. You can do so by commenting on this. If you're on YouTube, just post a comment down below and we'll chat about it. But if you want to chat to me more directly, you can go join the System is Down forum. It is our forum that is open to everybody who's willing to civilly have these conversations. You can find it by going to tsidpod.com/forum and ask to join, and I'll get you in there. But yeah, come on over. Let's talk about it. What do you think? And if you're already in the forum, you know what to do. Let me know what you think. Okay, so the Downers Club, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, is now on Patreon. It is our patron program that helps keep the show going. If you want to be a part of the show, help support it, help it keep growing, go to patreon.com/the system is down. Again, we've got a whole plethora of bonus audio, video content over there, and we give out merch depending on the levels that you sign up at. So I got to read some names here, some downers. There's so many people that have, we've had several new people join the Downers Club just since it's switched over to Patreon. We've had another bunch of people switch over from Podbean to Patreon. So I'm just going to go ahead and read all y'all so I make sure I don't miss anybody if you're new or if you're just re-upping from the former platform. I mean, I'm grateful either way, and we've had several people up their pledge too since then because the content keeps getting better. Have you not noticed? All right, so thank you so much to Andrew Sichling, Cindy Burton, Forrest Bazat, Mark Clare, Clint Rankin, John Barnhouse, Austin Wilson, Jessica Swift, Mary Rome, Curtis Berrialt, Rachel Roberts, John Schweppe, Nick Tucker, Lee Latorno, Sean Kushat, Justin Zielinski, Lucas Riley, William Wells, and Tyler Mills. Thank all of you so much for supporting the show financially. You are amazing, and you are the reason why the video quality, well, I was still using the old camera when we shot this one, but the video quality is now 1,000,000 times an arm and a leg and a head and a shoulders better than it used to be. If you watch some of the video interviews that are coming up, I recently used you guys' money to upgrade that and give you a better viewing experience, and we're going to be using it for other things to make sure that this show is as good as it possibly can be for you. All the money from this thing, this Downers Club, goes straight back to you guys because I'm just going to keep making it as good as I possibly can. Alrighty, so blah, 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 blah. You know about all the social networks, right? You've heard of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all those fun things. Go over and like, share, subscribe, and do all that junk. I'm not going to get into the details because if you don't know how to use it by now, then you'll never figure out the internet at this point because you've got way too much catching up to do. But if you wouldn't mind going to iTunes or your Apple iTunes app and leaving a review for the show, preferably a 5-star review, and just let people know what this is, how much you love it, and you know what they can expect. That would be great, and it will take you about 30 seconds, and you will boost the numbers for the show and help more people hear it. If more people hear it, more people join the Downers Club. More people join the Downers Club, I am able to afford more things to make this show bigger and better. All these things are for you, just for you, because I love you, I really do. Whether you're a contributing listener or just a listener, every download of the show matters because that is boosting our credibility as well as we move up in the charts on iTunes and other platforms. So do that. And of course, go out, have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody this week. I know we live in a world where that is borderline impossible, but try to. And maybe preface, if you're going to talk to somebody about something that you know you disagree on, maybe preface with, I'm not trying to argue here, but what do you think about this? And then listen to them. Primarily listen. That is the most important part of a conversation. Know what you believe and listen to the other person. Know what you believe. Where do you stand on the topic? Are you going to be able to defend it a little bit, or at least, express your views? But then listen. All right? Do that. Do all of that stuff. I'll be back here first thing next Monday morning, faithfully, as always, with some more uncomfortable content for your ears. Thank you guys so much for listening. And until next week, please question everything and stand comfortable. Thanks. This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.